Ready? Everybody ready? Okay, good evening, everybody. Let's see, I sound like I'm echoing. Hang on. Yeah. I'm up here and there. Okay, well, we'll just do our best. Welcome to the City of Kingston Historic Landmark Preservation Commission meeting. Tonight is October 10th. It's 6:31 p.m. My name is Suzanne Cahill from the City of Kingston Planning Office. I'm the Planning Director. I have a few announcements to make. We got to figure this out. We're going to work on the system first, but in the meantime, if you can please silence your cell phone, we would greatly appreciate that. If you do need to use the bathrooms, they are
Something's not right. No, I can't hear.
Leanne,
Ah,
I think we have you. Can you hear us now?
yes, yes, yeah, came back. The sound went down. We're good.
Thank you, Ethan. Kevin, if you could introduce yourself.
I'm Kevin McAvoy. I'm here remotely tonight. Um, um, I had other meetings and my schedule that on remote.
Well, thank you. All right, I'd also like to introduce Ethan Dickerman, our staff. You explain your role here.
I'm Ethan Dickerman. I'm the Historic Preservation Administrator for the City of Kingston's Landmarks Commission.
All right. The first order of business is the adoption of last month's meeting minutes. Has everyone had a chance to review them? Okay. All right. Are there any changes or additions to the minutes as prepared? Robert?
Yeah, I think it was the last sentence on the minutes. It's a little off. It may be to remember. I know this is really hard. Maybe hard to remember exactly but what I meant in that and what was answered, I believe, is not what was written down. It's a little. It's close, but not.
How would you, are you seeking to amend?
I think I asked. Yeah, I think I would like to amend it, or if anybody remembers what I don't remember. But I think I asked the architectural historian how much of a structure, what percentage of the structure could be changed and not, and still remain the same structure. And I don't think that came across in the minutes.
You're talking about the discussion section right here, bottom left.
Yeah, also reconstruction factor. I thought I was a little clear with that. I may not, but I thought I was a little clear with that.
No, just well, sure the transcription video. So it should really read how much can it be altered? Is that
It still remains
still
same structure.
okay?
All right. Okay, to summarize, what we are doing is changing the last bullet point, Utica Call Hain, to specifically state how much of a building can be changed without changing its eligibility. All right. Then, would you like, is there any further discussion on Robert's amendment? Right. Then I will move adoption of the minutes as amended. Do I hear a second?
Andrea Pute, second.
Right? Kevin, have you been able to follow this?
Yes,
All
yes,
right.
I had the document open on my end as well.
Great. All right, then I'll call the roll. Nettie, you're recusing because you weren't here. All right. Robert?
Aye.
Rhea? I also vote aye. Kevin?
Aye,
Thank you. All right, new business, 171 Wall Street. Is anyone here on that? Hi, I'm afraid we're going to have to live with the echo. Could you have a seat over here? Introduce yourself and give us a overview of your proposal.
My name's Eric Winchell. I live at 171 Wall Street. Been there 17 years. I have a garage that sits on the back of my lot about 115 feet off of Wall Street. All made of modern materials, substantially compromised by termites, the framing, the trim, and I'd like to demolish it.
So Eric, it's not your intention to rebuild anything? Okay.
Nothing on that location.
All right, any questions from members of the board for Mr. Winchell?
When do you think it was built?
Roughly 1950.
Gotcha.
Any other questions? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion that we declare this type 2 action under seeker.
So moved, Robert.
Thank you. Do I hear a second?
Aye, Andrea.
The echo's going to get you.
Just push it a little further away.
We'll see. All right. Any discussions on seeker? Hearing none, I'll call the roll. Nettie?
Aye.
Robert?
Aye.
Andrea?
Aye.
Kevin?
aye.
I also vote yes. All right. I move that commission find as fact that the proposed demolition of a non-contributing and degraded garage at 171 Wall Street, a local landmark, if done according to the plans reviewed at this meeting and according to the procedures stipulated in section 405-2 Sex L and section 405-26 JC of the City of Kingston's form-based zoning code is compatible with the historic character of the property for the following reasons. The proposed work is to take place at a non-contributory accessory garage in the northwest corner of 171 Wall Street, a circa 1720, 1.5-story Jacobus Maston Dutch stone house, situated on the west side of Wall Street, midway between St. James and Warren Street. That the existing mid-20th century non-contributing garage is in severe disrepair due to termite damage and must be removed, that the applicant proposes to remove the structure with no replacement and will be returning the area to lawn, that the applicant shall follow all legal requirements during the removal and disposal of debris, that any changes or additions to the plans or work specifically described and outlined in the submitted application would be subject to further review by our commission prior to that additional work being carried out. Commission's approval does not obviate the need for a demolition permit from the City of Kingston's Building Safety Division or any other required approvals from relevant coordinating agencies. Based on the preceding findings of fact, I move that on this 10th day of October 2024, our commission grant a preservation notice of action to the above referenced applicant for the work as described herein and in his application to the commission, such notice to be subject to the conditions contained in the foregoing motion. Do I hear a second? Second. Thank you, Robert. Any further discussion? Hearing none, I'll call the roll. Nettie?
Aye.
Robert?
Aye.
Andrea?
Aye.
Kevin?
Aye.
I also vote yes. Thank you, Eric. All right, up next, 27 Crown Street. Is someone here on that?
Yes, indeed.
All right, if you would introduce yourself, turn on the mic, and give us a quick overview of your plans.
Hi, everybody. My name is Carl Frankel. Hello, Matt. I'm really here for two reasons. There are two parallel requests that I'm making. First, I'm in the process of applying for an ADU +1 grant, and we need your approval on two items there. Do you have visual representations here, or? Right, that, well, let me start with this one. So there's a stairwell. This is the back of the house. Crown Street would be to the left. So that there's a stairwell that comes down, but there is a gate, so it's not visible from the street. That's the first piece of it. And then the second is we need an egress window, and our architect has offered windows, transept windows, is that what it's called? Right, that's those that she says comply with historical requirements. So those are the two approvals that we're requesting with regard to the ADU. And then we are also have received a DRI grant to rehab our basement and remediate the mold from our basement. And for reasons that I can explain if you want, but there's general agreement among all parties, including Bartex, the most efficient way to get the moldy debris out of the basement would be through a door on the side porch, which you see there. And we actually have screens, trellis-like screens, so that door is basically invisible from the street. I mean, if you really work hard, you can see a corner, but if you're passing by, you basically won't see it. And the reason we want this is the alternative would be come through the house and cross-contaminate the house, and my wife is ill from mold contamination. So this is a matter of some urgency for us in terms of her health, and we don't want to increase the risk to her by bringing moldy stuff through the house, even if it's contained. There's a higher risk of cross-contamination. So those are
All
the
right, so
two
that
separate
leads
asks.
to your cellar stairs, if
That's
I'm
correct.
following.
The landing at the head of the cellar stairs, that's right. So it's a direct egress from the basement, yes.
One thing that we did identified when I was looking at the staff notes for tonight is there may be a requirement for a major waiver from the planning board for the access to the ADU not being a direct street access. Under the new form-based code, when you look at the building form, and this would be a detached house building form, it requires all of the residential units to have street frontage access. And so I'm looking at that right now with a couple of other of my peers here to see if that is also applicable when there is an ADU. In this case, being in the house, it may be applicable. Obviously, if it was detached and we're like in a separate accessory structure in the back rear yard, that wouldn't be an applicable situation. So that's why I want to just confirm that. But we may have to work with you to get through a planning board process for a major waiver. But I just want to let you know that right now that, well, we're looking at it.
I appreciate this. I'm actually confused because if the objective of the ADU plus one is to get more affordable housing, but I can't legally get access to the third floor without violating the historic rules, that gets kind of weird, right?
I understand. And that's why we're looking at it.
Okay,
Okay.
I totally
All
understand.
right. I just
I will
want to
happily
make you aware of
cooperate
it
in any way
before
necessary.
so that you don't.
We've already invested significant money in this, so I hope that's not a late-breaking stopper for us.
All right. Any other questions from a board member? Andrea, I'm not familiar with this style of window.
If you could go back to that elevation. So it's really just a casement style window as per the notes there. So it's more of just a patterning on the window, on the glass. So the casement style window opens like this as
Right.
opposed to the double hungs. So that's really all it is. I think it honestly looks contextual to the house. So yeah, and it should meet casement windows generally, based on their size and per the code notes from Jennifer, it should more than meet per that requirement. So yeah.
Right. Thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions for the applicant?
Third floor dwelling unit means a sprinkler up there?
It will be sprinkled.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because that's usually
Yeah, it's part of the plan, yeah.
Evan, any questions? All right, hearing none, I will move forward and entertain a motion that we declare this a type 2 action under seeker. Do I hear a motion?
Andrea Pute, so moved.
Do I hear a second?
Second, maybe.
Any discussion? Hearing none, I'll call the roll. Nettie?
Aye.
Robert?
Aye.
Andrea?
Aye.
Kevin?
Aye.
I also vote yes. All right, on the underlying application. I move that the commissioners present find as fact that the proposed creation of a new entryway door on the front porch and construction of an exterior staircase in the rear for a third floor ADU at 27 Crown Street in the Kingston Stockade Local, State, and National Historic District, if done according to the plans reviewed at this meeting and according to the procedures stipulated in section 405.26L of the City of Kingston's form-based zoning code, is compatible with the historic character of the district for the following reasons. That the proposed work is to take place at the 2.5-story Queen Anne Victorian dwelling situated midway between St. James and Warren Streets dating to the 1880s. That it was occupied during this period by Noah Woolven, who worked as the postmaster and as a dry goods merchant, and subsequently his son William before being sold out of the family in the 1920s. that the applicant shall construct a new basement door that matches the one-on-one panel design, composition, and color of the existing ground floor entryway door on the north side of the front porch, surrounded by the same trim work, but that this new door shall have a solid wood upper panel instead of a glass panel. That the applicant shall construct a new exterior staircase made of white painted wood in the structure's rear that shall provide access to a new third-story code-compliant ADU rental unit. That a new rear-facing dormer on the north gable shall be constructed following the original structure's design features, materials, and colors to match to allow access from the new staircase into the ADU unit. That the third floor Crown Street facing gable 1/1 double hung windows are late replacements and must be replaced to meet building code standards for the third story ADU residential spaces. That the applicant may install new Windsor pinnacle wood windows with 5/8 inch, I think this is the wrong word, muttons, in a diamond pattern in the third story Crown Street facing gable to meet egress code requirements. That any changes or additions to the plans or work specifically described and outlined in the submitted application may be subject to further review by our commission prior to the additional work being carried out. The commission's approval does not obviate the need for a building permit from the City of Kingston's Building Safety Division or any other required approvals from relevant coordinating agencies. Based on the preceding findings of fact, I move that on this 10th day of October 2024, our commission grant a preservation notice of action to the above referenced applicant for the work as described herein and in his application to the commission, such notice to be subject to the conditions contained in the foregoing motion. Do I hear a second?
Second, Robert.
Thank you, Robert. Any further discussion? Hearing none, I'll call the roll. Nettie?
Aye.
Robert?
Aye.
Andrea?
Aye.
Kevin?
Aye.
Thank you. I also vote yes. So, thank you, Carl.
Thank you very much, everybody.
I'm not going to be in, but
Here we
we
go.
can do it next week.
Sign on, please. All right. Up next, 93 Broadway. Is someone here on that? Hello. If you give us your name and a quick overview of your project.
Hi, I'm Nicole Nyhan, and this is a signage minor waiver application, I suppose. So I'm going to be running a business out of this building called The Bridge, a community wellness space and apothecary. So there'll be a little kind of herbal focused shop in the front. Behind that immediate front space, yoga studio, community events, intimate gatherings, performances, workshops, and eventually, probably later in 2025, the second floor will open up as like a treatment space. So massage, acupuncture, that kind of thing. We'll have some bath treatments as well.
All right. And the need for the waiver is on account of what's happening on the windows, not that.
Right, so more than one sign, I suppose, on the windows.
Okay. Can you give us a sense of size and placement?
Yep, so this has some of the specs there, so you can get the actual dimensions here, and then the mock-up of the building itself can show you the placement on the building, if you have that
Can
file.
you go back to that? Okay, so that would be repeated, I'm guessing, on the similar sized window. Is that your plan?
No. No.
So it's just, I guess when I applied, I indicated the two different dimensions for these. So I suppose that registered as two separate
Right.
signs?
Under the code, she's allowed to have in a storefront one window sign. And that has to be, that's limited to 25% of one window. So the bridge and her descriptors down below are considered two separate signs on one window. So that is really the impetus for, it's a minor waiver as well, but because it's a minor waiver, and it's in a historic district, we're required to refer it to the HLPC for a recommendation back to our office. The little window sign above the doors in the transom is considered an exempt sign under our code. And she also has a projecting sign, which is allowed, and it conforms to the code. So other than having the two signs, if she didn't have the waiver, she would be totally conformant and wouldn't be here.
All right, thank you for that explanation. Now I see it. Okay, so it's just the one window that's having the application. Thank you. Any questions from any other HLPC members for the applicant?
I think it looks great.
Thank you.
All right. Then, let's see. I think we have to do type 2 on this.
Yeah, you can recognize it as type 2, and then you have your PNA, which is a recommendation PNA.
All right, so I will entertain a motion to declare this a type 2 action under seeker.
Andrea Pute, so moved.
Do I hear a second?
Second, Robert.
Thank you. Any discussion? Hearing none, I'll call the roll. Nettie?
Aye.
Robert?
Aye.
Andrea?
Aye.
Kevin?
Aye,
You-
there we go. Yeah, it was muted, sorry.
Was that an aye?
Yes, he said.
Yes, it
Okay.
was an aye, yes.
I also vote
Third
yes.
time. Third time is the charm.
Sounds good.
There you go.
All right. I move that the commission find as fact that the proposed non-conforming signage application for 93 Broadway in Rondout West Strand Historic District, if done according to the plans reviewed at this meeting and according to the procedures stipulated in section 405-26L of the City of Kingston's form-based zoning code, is compatible with the historic character of the district for the following reasons. That the proposed work is to take place at the two-story Italianate row building located on the west side of Broadway, 3 structures south of the intersection of Broadway and Spring Street, which dates to about 1860 and which retains almost all of its original elements and has received no major modern alterations and is one of the better of its type and style in the district. This is according to the State Historic Preservation Office in 1975, and it looks like it hasn't changed much since then. That the applicant seeks to install signage which does not conform with section 405.17.5 of the form-based code, and that it has more than a single window sign and a large storefront window, requiring a minor waiver from the planning administrator, and a recommendation on such action is required from this commission. That the HLPC recommends in favor of the second window sign, noting its compatibility with typical storefront design and with other business establishments in the area, and that in total, the 25% coverage limit is not exceeded. HLPC recognizes a conforming single double-sided projecting sign with a gray body and gold lettering, and the 2 window signs in the southern picture window with a 26-inch wide business name and a 36-inch wide description for the business beneath in gold, and the exempt window sign consisting of a 9-inch wide business logo in the transom window above the entry door. The HLPC shall forward the recommendation that the signage is considered appropriate for the character of the Rondout
West Strand Historic.
Thank you, Rondout West Strand Historic District. I'm not good with And any changes or additions to the plans and or work specifically described and outlined in the submitted application would be subject to further review by our commission prior to the additional work being carried out. Our commission's approval does not obviate the need for a building permit from the City of Kingston's Building Safety Division or any other required approvals from relevant coordinating agencies. Based on the preceding findings of fact, I move that on this 10th day of October 2024, our commission grant a preservation notice of action to the above referenced applicant for the work as described herein and in its application to our commission, such notice to be subject to the conditions contained in the foregoing motion. Do I hear a second?
Second, Nettie.
Thank you, Nettie. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, I'll call the roll. Nettie?
Aye.
Robert?
Aye.
Andrea?
Aye.
Kevin?
Aye.
I also vote yes. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much.
Have a great evening.
Thank you.
Referral from zoning task force, first floor height
That's-
requirements.
Yeah, I mean, that's one. I don't believe that Bartek is here, so do you want it, we can move on to, the
All right,
height
so
issue.
I'll do a second
we'll-
call on that.
Yeah, we'll go back to that. I mean, that works. There's people here.
All right. The next up is the petition to designate the Pike Plan canopy. We had our public hearing. We held it open for written comments. We've received a couple of reports. Has everyone had a chance to review the additional reports that came in? Okay. I want to go over this section of our code just to get a reminder of what our criteria under the new code is. But before I do that, I feel like it's important to give a little extra background here. The Stockade District was the first historic district Kingston created. It was done before most of the enabling statutes on either a state or a national level. This is something that Kingston decided was important right off the bat and for itself. So in addition to our criteria under the new form-based code, there are some statements from the older code that have been carried in. They're to be found at, let's see if I can, 405.26 L 8 and 9. And I bring this up because these were not addressed in any of the reports, but I think they do need to be part of our consideration. It's rare that any city would have come up with this so early, and I think the folks preparing the reports were wise to focus in on the 4 criteria laid out. But this provides under subsection 8A, it's entitled legislative intent. And so the purpose of the subsection is to provide for the promotion of the educational, cultural, economic, and general welfare of the public through the protection, enhancement, perpetuation, and preservation of landmarks and landmark districts. The legislative body declares it is in the public interest to ensure that distinctive landmarks and landmark districts shall not be injuriously affected, that the value to the community of those buildings having architectural and historical worth shall not be impaired, and that said districts be maintained and preserved to promote their use for the education, pleasure, and welfare of the citizens of the City of Kingston and others. Now, this is admittedly general language. You won't find this in a state code, you won't find this in a national code, but as a local body, I felt it important to call it to our attention. This is what folks meant specifically for the Stockade District. And since it came first, I wanted to call that to everyone's attention before we double back to the more specific criteria laid out in the code. Furthermore, it continues to state that this area, which represents an important heritage relative to the Dutch and English colonial periods, contains the architecture of the past 300 years, and new development must not be allowed to erode the best of the architectural spaces and cultural organizations of the past. I want to call that to your attention because that was what was in the code before the criteria we're going to be discussing. Furthermore, there's some additional criteria to be considered by the Commission to be used as a basis where relevant for establishing relationships to the external features of buildings in the immediate neighborhood. And they give 12. I'm going to read through them really quickly. They're the sorts of things we typically discuss, so I don't think any of these will be a surprise to us. The building height in relation to surrounding buildings, relationship to nearby roof shapes, relationship between the width to height of the front elevation, the size proportion of spacing of openings within the facade and elevations exposed to view, the rhythm of spacing of buildings and building elements on the street, the design and placement of entrances and projections, relationships of materials, textures, and colors, relationship of architectural details, the continuity of walls, the relationship of landscape elements, paving, and the effect on existing or historically significant spaces. And it shall be our further duty, this continues, for the Commission to exercise judgment in accord with the basis of decisions stated herein and maintain the desirable character of the landmark or district and prevent construction, reconstruction, alteration, or demolition out of harmony with existing buildings insofar as character, material, color, line, and detail are concerned, and thus to prevent the degeneration of property, to safeguard public health, promote safety, preserve beauty of the character of the landmark or the landmark district. And we are supposed to exercise our judgment in accord with the guidance of the U.S. Secretary of Interior standards, which is something we have done for a long time. I call this to folks' attention because that was the state of the law when the Stockade District was created in the 60s. It predates the it predates what we're looking at at tonight, and I think it's important to just get a sense of what was intended when the Stockade District was created. And I want to double back now to the 4 criteria that most directly control us. So that's 7L7. L7B. Nope, that's area variances. There's L. Yeah. Okay. Do you have something in writing that would cover it? I'd ask that you submit that, and if you want to highlight something you want me to read aloud, I'm happy to do that. It's kind of late in the game, Ms. Polidoro. My understanding is we're making a decision tonight, so if you want a chance to give me something, I would ask that you do it in writing right now. Let me do it. I don't want to have a presentation when we closed a public hearing. But have you got anything? I understand that, but that was the state of the law when this was set up, and I thought it important that people pay attention to it. Wow. This is, all right, so, right, okay. First, I thought this was 8 pages long. She's given everybody's copies. The one person who won't be able to get this is you, Kevin. So what I think I'm tempted to do here is accept it even though it's late. It's from their expert. And it is, in some senses, a response to other written comments. I don't have a real problem with it. Yeah, I think that's the reasonable thing to do. Let me distribute copies.
Are we talking about the Wally
Grove Seats
Wheeler
one.
letter?
I'm sorry, Kevin?
Like, just a quick point of order. Are we talking about the Wally Wheeler letter?
What this is entitled is, it's a submission, I'm presuming by Culhane.
Oh,
Who
okay,
spoke here before.
right.
Right. And so she's pointing out 2 things at the top. One is that Mr. Neil Larson,
Mhm.
who submitted one of the written reports to us after we closed the public hearing, agrees with, well, according to Ms. Culhane, agrees with the petitioner's 2 independent experts on the matter at hand. The Pike Plan has accrued historic significance for its association with urban renewal and preservation in Kingston and should be considered a contributing resource. And she goes on to believe that it would qualify as a state and national register stockade to not only our decision, but I believe that they have made a submission to SHPO, but that's
Mhm.
not our purview. In an additional report from Ethan Dickerman, she believes that it's recast as supporting an opposite conclusion, that it is not historic and lacks integrity. She opines that Ethan has erred and asks that we place more weight on Mr. Larson's conclusions. I'm going to just read this part verbatim rather than trying to summarize.
Mhm.
The integrity standard set by the National Register is mirrored in local evaluation. The 7 criteria for evaluating integrity are location, design, setting, material, workmanship, feeling, and association. A resource does not need to meet all criteria, only a majority of them. And contrary to Mr. Dickerman's assertion that a resource should exceed 75% of the criteria, no percentage system is prescribed by the National Register, and in fact, a simple majority is all that's needed. Mr. Larson argues that a case can be made for the Pike Plan meeting 5 of 7 criteria: location, design, setting, feeling, and association. Mr. Dickerman misreads this discussion, citing Larson as stating that the Pike Plan meets only 3. Larson actually argues for 5, and and quotes the Larson report, or at least the portion which reads, enough qualities have been met to make a claim of historic integrity. And then out of scope issues. On page 11, Mr. Larson states, I'd support a plan to preserve the Pike Plan, but would understand if it would be more economically prudent to remove them. While Mr. Larson weaves into his argument topics that are outside the scope of the Kingston Historic Landmark Preservation Commission, specifically mixed public opinion and City of Kingston's financial considerations, these confuse the deliberation that must set these concerns aside. Simply stated, in the professional opinion of the city's outside expert, the Pike Plan is historic and worthy of preservation. Now, those are conclusions from Ms. Culhane. I think we've all had a chance to read both of the submitted reports that she's making reference to. All right.
Just,
I'm presuming it's Ms. Culhane. Am I correct, Ms. Polidoro? Okay.
and
Well-
just to, Kevin, we just sent you a PDF email.
Oh, all right. Okay, I'll grab that.
Okay.
Thank you for doing that.
Thank you.
All right.
Hmm.
Thank you, Brian. I recognized your voice. I didn't need to turn around to know it was you. It's noted on the record, and I am not going to allow a colloquy between you at all. We understand that. All right. Yeah. Thank you for bearing with me through that. All right. Moving on. So we've got 4 basic criteria under the code. The first one is exemplifies or reflects broad cultural, political, economic, or social history of the nation, state, or community. Now, the presentations at our public hearing and both of the written reports submitted focused in on this as a key and specifically for urban renewal, the history of urban renewal. Now, some of you know I was the city planner before I became an attorney, and for the city of Wilmington, Delaware, urban renewal is something I had to wrestle with down there and watched the city of Kingston wrestle with when I moved here in the 80s. So I wasn't here for the 70s when the Pike Plan was being considered. I personally was impressed with John Hoyt's presentation to us at our public hearing. He was actually here, he knew the people involved. And I'm not certain that it meets the broad political, economic, or social history of the nation, state, or community. The Pike Plan, as created, was not standard for urban renewal. It was, in my experience anyhow, very particular, much more so than your average urban renewal. I mean, the biggest example of that here in Kingston is the plowing over of half of Rondout. It was a pretty heavy-handed approach for the most part. Now, the most common result of urban renewal on most commercial areas was the creation of pedestrian ways. Poughkeepsie is the best local example. Where I was a city planner, it was 15 blocks in the middle of the business district there. This was the most common response of a lot of towns. Kingston took a different track when it adopted the original Pike Plan. Mr. Pike was an artist and was very particular about each building and created balustrades and wooden, the wooden original Pike Plan installation. I don't know if everyone here was living in Kingston to see that. I was. Yeah. But that was the overall visual impact, and we heard plenty of testimony that that was his intent. It went facade by facade by facade with its own detail that in his thought seemed appropriate. That's not the standard urban renewal that I lived with as a city planner. I don't know, I wasn't here for the actual creation of the original plan, but I put a lot of weight on John Hoyt's testimony that it was meant as a response to the creation of malls. And the idea was to give shoppers protection. Not a bad idea. And it has, in at least two forms, existed for quite a while here in Kingston. So that's my overview of it. And as I stare at number 1, it's not an exemplar of urban renewal in my book. Now, can you argue it reflects? Maybe. What do other folks think?
Yeah, it's Kevin. I just went back and read Neil Larson, page 9 on current integrity, and I would suggest everybody else do the same. I think it's too much to read into the, you know, to read it right now, but, aloud. But it looks to me like it's not, there may be 4 uh, of the criteria on integrity that are met. But at the last sentence that Neil comes up with is the latest iteration is now in need of an overhaul. A strict application of the integrity test, finding that authenticity has been compromised, coupled with the poor physical condition and the expense of the rehabilitation, which would further compromise integrity, is persuasive. So I'm not sure that he's exactly agreeing with Ms. Culhane. He does, yeah, hedge it a little bit further on, and that's probably where she's coming from. But he also says there's not a clear path forward.
So what's your reading on that?
My reading?
Yeah, your opinion.
Well, I think there may be 4 of the qualities that are met rather than 3. It's a little confusing the way you wrote it, but it looks like there might be a 4th one. The 5th one is he just states it's debatable. So his last sentence says, states, what I just read, and I'm inclined to agree with Neil on that it is persuasive that the integrity test and the authenticity has been compromised.
Right, this is at the point, this is the difference between the original Pike plan and what was done in 2010.
Right, right, right. The paragraph starts off with current integrity of the Pike plan.
Right.
Oh, you have it up on the screen. Yeah, I'm reading it on my screen here. But yeah. Yeah.
And this is the National Register.
Yes.
So we don't get to make that decision. That's SHPO
Right.
and the Department of the Interior.
Right. I just wanted to point that out because there was a question over how many of the qualities had been met, where Ethan had said 3. Neil clearly states 3, but then he has further discussion where that you can indicating that there might be a 4th one, and that would be the plan's association with the historic district would be the 4th one. It's about 6, 8, I don't know, 10 lines down or so.
Yeah. So a strict application of the integrity test, finding authenticity has been compromised, is if I block out the following line, is persuasive. So to my reading, it's that the authenticity has been compromised.
Yeah, that's how I'm reading it. Yes.
Yeah. Okay, so that's a little different than the statement that we just heard submitted on behalf of the petitioner.
That's why I brought Neil up.
Yeah. All right. Any other comments, questions, things folks want to bring up on urban renewal, whether you think that this is well, exemplifies or reflects cultural, political, economic, or social history of the nation, state, or community. It is broad. This is not an easy call.
Yeah.
This is asking for lots of judgment from
I
us.
tend to agree. I think it's a highly subjective, I mean, look, you could say that a manhole cover exemplifies the economic, cultural, political state of a community at any point in time because of what's stamped on it. So are we going to call that historic? It's a manhole cover. Is it in good shape? Is it in bad shape? You know, I think those are the other parts we have to consider with this. I don't know if you can look at each of these as a standalone item.
Okay.
I was here during, I lived under the Pike Plant. I owned 301 Wall Street, the Kinsley building. Couple things. Had I ever gone to, one of the reasons I didn't buy under the Pike Plan originally because it was too dark, but that has nothing to do with this. But when I did do it, I bought this, the corner building, because there was half with no Pike Plan and half with a little Pike Plan. And had I put a canopy up on that building, it would not have looked like that. But then I'm not John Pike, so he came up with his own thing. So I look at what happened in 2010 when I was very much up there and involved. They tore down so much of it, and some of it still looks the same. Some of the facades are the same, but I got to tell you, it's not the same thing. I saw what they did to the Storm building, Robert Storm's building. Copper roofing things that were taken off, slanted roofs. The slant on all the roofs has changed. I think the integrity has been lost for this, and I think that it was even renamed. It was, I believe I'm right about that. It was renamed the Uptown Canopy from the Pike Plant. So 10 years ago, whatever it was, can't do the math, but whatever it was, people saw it then that it's, it meant a lot, and it didn't mean a lot. It was just a covering for people uptown with the rain, I guess. Is it historic? I just can't. I mean, that's what I can't wrap my head around, because what it's doing is it's choking off historic buildings. It's choking them. It's killing the historic buildings, and we're keeping up this badly made, badly repaired canopy thing. And I love John Pike's original illustration. It was really beautiful. I think I saw it in downtown Disney or someplace like that. It looks like a Disneyland version of America Uptown sometime ago in the good old days. Does it belong here with these buildings? I don't know. But anyway, that's all we're talking about. The Pike Plant, I do not, structurally, I don't think that it's the same Pike Plan that was originally put out. That's one. And two, as far as Pike goes, yeah, he did do that painting. He worked with an architect. There were multiple changes to the Pike Plan as a result of financial things. So it wasn't even his original, he wasn't the architect, and it wasn't his original idea necessarily. Maybe he went along with it, I don't know. And you never know in the situations with city government, whatever, what was removed and what wasn't done that he wanted done and how it was built. I just don't see it. I don't see it as a historic monument. And I can't vote that way.
Right. So you've ticked into a couple of other things that are part of our criteria. First, is it representative of the notable work of a master builder, designer, or architect whose individual ability has been recognized? John Pike was a painter. best known for watercolors.
The architect was well-known, but it wasn't his design. You know, he just did the work and worked
Well-
with the city. So it's, you know,
Right. So I have a hard time applying number 4 in our written criteria to even the original Pike plan, and it's even harder to do to the canopies as they exist today, as you've described. This is not representative of John Pike's work or this architect's work. It's been mostly replaced with concrete and a metal with skylights on it. Not exactly at all what John Pike lays out in the plans that I've seen.
I remember, I went to the architectural reviews of the Pike plan before they before they renovated it. And that was the point, is that it's too dark under them, put the skylights in. They wanted to change the Pike plan, and they did.
Okay, so I think that really goes to the idea of integrity as well as being discussed in what we have up on the screen now. So much of it is gone. The vague notion of a covering exists, but John Pike's original plan is on paper at this point. It's not really on the street, as far as from what I recall and what you lived under. I think that's pretty clear. Embodying distinguishing characteristics of an architectural type specimen inherently valuable for a study of a period, style, method of construction, or of indigenous materials or craftsmanship. And what we've just gone over, to me, doesn't fit number 3 very well at all. I mean,
I didn't even consider that looking at those 4. I didn't even consider that because I know it. I mean, I see the materials, they're horrible.
and furthermore, I mean, we had an excellent example of this with the Tri-Arts building on Henry Street. It was a calling card for a master craftsman. You want Queen Anne? Walk around the corner. I'll show you Queen Anne. You want me to put a window in the middle of your chimney? I can do that right over here. And this, as it's a jumble of crazy styles, but it would fit number 3, but I can't see the canopy as it exists today fitting there. Is identified with historic personages or with important events in national, state, or local history. I think there was an argument regarding urban renewal that might apply there. I'm trying to remember the
That
detail.
was the John Pike part.
Okay. They were trying to, you're thinking of John Pike as a historic personage.
That's the,
Yeah, and I believe that Mr. Larson's conclusion on that was we need to know a whole heck of a lot more about John Pike. I mean, he did have a strong local and maybe even national reputation as a watercolor artist, and is, I understand, still well regarded. But buildings, especially buildings that aren't really there anymore, except in, I don't know, maybe 3 facades, still have any of the original wood design balustrades and other details that he was instrumental with. It feels to me that in 2010 that got pretty much wiped away in physical architectural representation uptown. So we're left with broad cultural, political, economic, or social history of the community. It's been up for a while. We are not bound by the national register's 50-year rule. If we think that that's important, we need to bat that one around. I think again, I don't see it as an exemplar of urban renewal. It was an interesting twist, maybe, but I don't see it replicated a lot of other places, or at least I tried wandering around the internet to see if anyone else came up with this, and I have my limitations, but I didn't see anything quite like what Kingston has done. And it's been there for a little under 50 years. Now, I've enjoyed being able to undo my umbrella to get from the courthouse to Jane's Ice Cream when it existed, under even the old dark version. But does it exemplify or reflect broad cultural, political, or economic or social history? I mean, the manhole cover parallel lets us know that this can be read 100 different ways.
Well, and if you're saying broad in the timeline, the Pike Plan is just a small fraction of that historic area. It's, I mean, it's only been there 50 years, when in fact, everything else is a couple of hundred or so.
Right.
So when you say broad,
Yeah, the idea of a canopy is almost 50 years old. The canopy as it exists now is what, 13 years old?
this very
2011 is.
Yeah. So if my
that's-
math is right. So I have a hard time landmarking something that doesn't, as it exists today, trying to lock that in concrete, so to speak. I have a hard time doing that. It doesn't seem to me a good use of the landmark powers that the city has. I mean, Wall Street, as Nettie has pointed out, has exemplars that go back to the 17th and 18th centuries, that the Stockade District does. And that was the basis for its original creation. And I'm really taken by the idea that we shouldn't be eroding the importance of the underlying architectural fabric. And I worry that the canopies as they exist now are literally eroding the buildings. You know, and they've tried one set of repairs and it didn't fix that. And you would remember better than I if the original Pike Plan had similar issues with causing problems in buildings.
I have a article from, I think it's 1980 or 81 from the Freeman, saying that they were already complaining about lack of maintenance and construction problems and all that with the original Pike Plan as early as 1980 or 81. So it's, and I agree, we're not here to talk about the underneath buildings, but I think hard to separate the two when you can't, those buildings can't evolve culturally or architecturally the way they would evolve with new materials, new doors, new signage and all that with the Pike Plan on. So it's kind of stifling that sort of, I mean, this is my view, it means nothing. And I understand that we're not talking about the underneath buildings, we're talking about that. So then when I pull it off of that, it means even less, I feel. I feel like it means it's this structure, excuse it, it's a half-assed build job on something that, you know, people want to come in out of the rain for. You know, I know I would have had a canopy up on we talked about it, putting a canopy up in front of 301 Wall Street. And you know, it would have kept people out of the rain, but better looking. It would have, I say let you know, take this thing down, let the people who own the building put up their own canopies. People are going to be upset, but they're going to be upset either way. But it's you know, this structure is such a you know, a dinosaur and monstrosity. I just think it's got to come down.
Don't mince Words.
Yeah, sorry, it's like-
And there's, I mean, there's obviously.
Can you turn your microphone on?
I mean, there's historical photos of canopies in the past, you know, fabric canopies in the early 20th century, correct? Yeah.
Yes.
So it's, I mean, people can replace that, they can do that, and they can sort of keep that historic look better, I think, than it is now.
Yeah, I don't see the canopy as presently constituted as um, as doing more than kind of being an echo of John Pike's vision and a pretty flattened, changed, amended version of it that doesn't live up to the original artistic vision, but has created visual continuity for 40 odd years, and in its present form for 13. But I do worry about damage to the fabric of the district as a whole if it remains indefinitely landmarked in this specific manner. I mean, maybe if we were talking about the original Pike plan, some of these might apply a little better, but the concrete structure that's there now, it's kind of a dull echo of it, and therefore doesn't reflect a broad cultural, political, economic, or social history. That's my take. Anyone else want to voice their opinion while we're here? On anyone on the commission? I should make that clear. Kevin, you're in the most difficult position to chime in. I can't tell.
Yeah, as far as that criteria goes, I would believe what we're looking at is urban renewal as a political, economic, and social history of the nation, state, or community. However, does that carry the day for the Pike plan? I don't know. The lack of integrity sort of weighs against it.
All right, thank you. Andrea, any final thoughts here?
No, I've just been trying to research your earlier point to seeing if you could find anything else that was relevant. I found something, but not quite the same. There was a place out in Tennessee that I had never heard of before. They had a walkable second story over top of their sidewalks as a response to urban renewal. Here's a picture of it in modern day.
Huh.
It's still standing, but I believe they said that in the article, I was trying to very quickly skim this, that there very few people walk on it up top today unless there are certain events that are occurring. But as a typical day-to-day practice, not many people are there, and it does not, there's about a 25% vacancy rate on that strip of road where that exists. But whether that's indicative or not of the state of that object still being there, that's a totally different subject. In Morristown, Tennessee.
The visual is different, and it looks like it's been more strictly maintained than ours. I see some.
For sure. It's also not as deep, it seems, as this. It's more of a maybe at most 2-person passable walkway if you're sucking your stomach in.
Okay, I see what you're saying. Yeah, that's hard to judge, but I see where it comes in the description. So thank you. You found something that's kind of close to what we've got here as a response to urban renewal, and it looks
also, for the record, it's also made entirely of concrete. So a very different response than obviously what we have. Not to say that concrete is easier to maintain. It still obviously has its own share of problems with delaminating and all kinds of other not fun material problems. But yeah,
One more
Tired
point.
of hearing from me, but no, there is just one more point about urban renewal, and the only one I can think of offhand is it's the Pruitt something buildings. There were 33 housing units, 11 stories each in St. Louis. And it was a response. It was in the late 50s, urban renewal. It was like one of the first, and it was supposed to be set the land, set the tone for urban renewal. Like it took out all these, and it wasn't a great neighborhood, but it took out all these buildings and things, and they put up these towers. And within 10 years, it was destroyed. People didn't want to live like that and all that. So they removed, and they're still removing those 33 buildings in St. Louis. They're still trying to get rid of these and rebuilding. So, some response is not to make it historic, but to get rid of it.
Okay. Interestingly, what you brought to my mind is the idea that the garden apartments down in the Rondout, which were built after urban renewal, are in some sense a more exemplar or reflection of urban renewal than the canopies uptown. I mean, and they've been well maintained by the Kingston Housing Authority for generations now. So if I had to find anything in town that would, in my mind, exemplify urban renewal, it would be that or the present-day police station in City Court, which became City Hall instead of the building we're sitting in now. I think that's stronger as an exemplar or a reflection of urban renewal than what we're looking at since 2010. All right. Have we talked this one to death? I'm getting a feeling that folks have their own opinions pretty well locked in. I think I will entertain a motion to declare our recommendation to the City Council as a type 2 action under seeker. Do I hear a motion?
Andrea Putes, so moved.
Do I hear a second?
Robert Tonner, so moved. Seconded.
Thank you, Robert. Any discussion? Hearing none, I will call the roll. Betty?
Aye.
Robert? Andrea?
Aye.
Kevin?
Aye.
I also vote yes. Okay. So because this is a recommendation, it's going to be in sort of a legalistic form with lots of whereases as opposed to findings of fact. So bear with me through this. Whereas on August 6th, 2024, William Gottlieb Management Company and their representatives filed a petition with our commission with 37 signers, out of which 15 were confirmed to be Kingston residents, requesting the Pike Plan canopy along portions of North Front and Wall Street to be designated a local landmark according to Section 405-26L7 of the City of Kingston's form-based zoning code. And whereas the petition seeks emergency designation of the Pike Plan canopy as a landmark on the basis that it exemplifies the broad cultural, political, economic, and social history of the City of Kingston, and the Pike Plan is identified with historic personages or with important events. And whereas the petition incorporated 2 professional preservation reports, one by Walter R. Wheeler of Hartgen Archaeological Associates Incorporated, and another by Kerry Culhane, PhD, which claimed the canopy met the following 3 points. 1, Section 405-26L7 of the form-based code's criteria for landmarks, and criterion A, B, and C of the National Register of Historic Places and the National Register's 50-year age guideline. And whereas Our commission engaged Neil Larson of Neil Larson and Associates Historic Preservation and Planning Services, Inc., an independent preservation consultant, to review the submitted materials and produce its own report on the canopy's eligibility for local landmark status, semicolon, and whereas pursuant to Section 405-26L7 of the Form-Based Code, our commission notified the petitioners and affected property owners by certified mail and posted notice in the local newspaper on August 19, 2024, of a public hearing to be held on September 11, 2024. And whereas the commission held a public hearing on September 11, 2024, at which written comment received prior to and at the hearing was recorded, along with oral testimony of the public. And whereas at the public hearing, several property owners along North Front and Wall Streets spoke explaining why the canopy should not be eligible for landmark status, including the canopy is a new reconstruction and compromises the historic integrity of buildings, that the canopy lacks integrity of design by John Pike because of previous alterations in 2010 and 2011, and the canopy damages the designated structures to which it is affixed, and the canopy hinders the ability for pedestrians to experience the intended design of the district buildings and is an inappropriate structure for the character of the Kingston Stockade Historic District. And whereas at the September 11, 2024 meeting, the Commission voted to table a decision on the petition pending receipt of a report by the city's consultant and leaving the public hearing open to accept additional written comments until September 30th, 2024. And whereas 2 additional written comments regarding the matter were received prior to the close of business on September 30th, 2024 and recorded, and whereas on September 20th, 2024, the city's preservation consultant submitted their professional report, which was posted on the city's website, concluding the following. A, the canopy only meets criterion A, exemplifies or reflects the broad cultural, political, economic, or social history of the nation, state, or community of Section 405-26L7B small I of the Form-Based Code for its association with Kingston's urban renewal era. The canopy only meets criterion A of the National Register for its association with the urban renewal era. C, the Kingston Stockade Historic District's National Register nomination paperwork and local landmark district description in Section 405-26L8 2 small i's of the Form-Based Code should be updated to expand its statement of significance and period of significance up to at least 1975 to include Kingston's urban renewal era and the Pike Plan canopy as a contributing structure within the district. D, that the canopy only meets 3 out of 7 aspects of the National Register's integrity test and acknowledges that the Pike Plan canopy's integrity is substantially compromised, disqualifying the structure from the National Register and local landmark designation. And whereas the City of Kingston's Historic Preservation Administrator prepared an independent report dated September 27th, 2024, which was posted to the city's website, that concludes the following. Historical and contemporary photographs of North Front and Wall Street demonstrate beyond doubt the substantial alterations to the canopy since its completion in 1976, including the original structure's temporary removal, subsequent reconstruction with new fabric, loss of character defining features, and addition of inappropriate modern features during the city-led reconstruction between 2010 and 2011. That the New York State Historic Preservation Office, the Ulster County Planning Board, and the National Trust for Historic Preservation's Main Street America program all recognize the canopy as inappropriate in the Kingston Stockade Historic District and supported plans for its removal as recently as 2009, and that discussions for the canopy's removal date back to the 1980s. that the report concurs with the findings of the 1989 Historic Rehabilitation and Streetscape Design Plan for the Stockade Area National Register Historic District in Kingston, New York, by Crawfords and Stearns, Architects and Preservation Planners, PLLC, that the Pike Plan canopy's construction and presence is a violation of standards 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and probably 7 and 10 of the Secretary of Interior's standards for rehabilitation. The majority of the property owners along North Front and Wall Streets were in opposition to the landmarking of the canopy. Whereas the HLPC finds that the proposed action is considered a Type 2 action under 6 NYCRR Part 617.5C38 and is predetermined not to have a significant impact on the environment and is precluded from environmental review under Environmental Conservation Law, Article 8, better known to us as SEEKR. Whereas the HLPC has considered all submissions and comments submitted in this proceeding and has considered the criteria under Form-Based Code 405.26 L7B together with all other relevant information in making a determination and recommendation to the Common Council. Now, therefore, be it resolved by the Historic Landmark Preservation Commission of the City of Kingston, New York, as follows. Section 1. The HLPC recommends to the Common Council that the August 6, 2024 petition submitted by William Gottlieb Management Company requesting an emergency local landmark designation for the Pike Plan be denied based on the following findings. A, that pursuant to Section 405L7B of the Form-Based Code, the criteria under which requests should be evaluated, the HLPC finds under small I, exemplifies or reflects the broad culture, political, economic, or social history of the nation, state, or community. As noted in the reports by Walter Wheeler, Kerry Culhane, and Neil Larson, the structure can be linked to Kingston's urban renewal era. However, the urban renewal era on the national, state, and local level was exemplified by seizing and demolishing large swaths of public and private property for the purpose of modernizing and improving aging infrastructure. In contrast, the Pike Plan was a limited project seeking to promote retail businesses in uptown Kingston. This limited project and goal by no means exemplifies or reflects the broad culture, political, economic, or social history of the nation, state, or community. It affected limited properties in a 2-block area for the purpose of competing with retail malls. Though the building of the canopies falls under urban renewal, it does not broadly exemplify or reflect the urban renewal era. The Commission finds that there are other building and housing projects within the City of Kingston that would be more appropriate and better exemplify this period should the city wish to designate a landmark for this purpose. Double small I is identified with historic personages or with important events in local, state, or national history. The Commission finds that this criterion is not met based on the report by Neil Larson, which demonstrated that, quote, a far more comprehensive biography and review of his artistic and architectural output is needed for such an evaluation, which must occur to determine John Pike's significance and if the canopy is an appropriate landmark to link to his contributions to society. As reflected in the materials submitted, John Pike was an accomplished artist who was known for his work in watercolor painting. He was neither a resident of Kingston nor did he have any known connection to the City of Kingston other than submitting the sketches which were picked as the basis for the original canopy design. 3 small I's embodies distinguishing characteristics of an architectural type specimen inherently valuable for a study of a period style method of construction or of indigenous materials or craftsmanship. The HLPC finds that this criterion is not met based on the report by Neil Larson, which demonstrated that the Pike Plan canopy was, quote, not unprecedented, but not a common solution, unquote, as a architectural form, and that the design is not directly associated with the American bicentennial celebration of 1976. The original design, which in itself deviated from that which was submitted by John Pike, was significantly altered when the majority of the canopies were reconstructed in 2010 and 2011. Small IV is representative, quote, is representative of the notable work of a master builder, designer, or architect whose individual ability has been recognized. The HLPC finds that this criterion is not met based on the report by Neil Larson, which, quote, demonstrated that the Pike Plan, which no longer embodies critical feature of John Pike's design, is the most appropriate resource to associate him with, close quote. Furthermore, John Pike was recognized as a painter and not recognized for any works as a, quote, master builder, designer, or architect. B, that pursuant to section 405-26 L7E of the form-based code, the public commentary solicited by the Commission from Northfront and Wall Street owners and non-owners demonstrated significant reasons why the canopy should not be designated a landmark and encouraged the city to remove the canopy and restore the Northfront and Wall Street scapes. These reasons included: A, the canopy is a new reconstruction and compromises the historic integrity of buildings. B, the canopy lacks integrity of design by John Pike because of previous alterations. C, the canopy damages the designated structures to which it is affixed. D, the canopy hinders the beauty of the existing buildings and is an inappropriate structure for the character of the Kingston Stockade Historic District. E, the current structure bears no resemblance to the former Pike Plan. It retains little to any of the architectural integrity of the original structure. The roof and cornices make up 90% of what you see. All that was removed and replaced. And, quote, the canopies are not only a non-contributing structure to the historic streetscape, but they are also a major detractor to the inherent architecture of the historic buildings themselves. The canopies are physically damaging the buildings and virtually make it impossible for building owners to fully restore their facades. This is a close quote, presumably from oral testimony at the time. I'm guessing that was Carol Amper, but I'm not sure.
No, that was Brian Cafferty.
Brian Cafferty, thank you. C, that pursuant to section 405-26 L7E of the form-based code, the Pike Plan report solicited by the Commission from the city's consultant and our historic preservation administrator demonstrated beyond a doubt that substantial alterations in the past to the canopy weakened its integrity, thereby disqualifying it from local landmark designation. Section 2. The Commission concurs with the 1989 Crawford and Stearns report, finding that the Pike Plan canopy construction between 1973 and 79 violated numbers 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and probably 7 and 10 of the Secretary of Interior standards for rehabilitation for the individual row buildings along Northfront and Wall Streets and the two streetscapes. Section 3. Based on the violations of the Secretary of the Interior standards for rehabilitation, our Commission supports removal of the Pike Plan, but prefaces said support upon the creation of a robust historical data-driven streetscape design plan informed by the 1989 Crawford and Stearns report that follows the Secretary of the Interior standards and the National Park Service technical preservation briefs, and includes consultation with the State Historic Preservation Office and all abutting property owners along the canopy on Northfront and Wall Streets. Section 4, that pursuant to Section 405-26L6 of the Form-Based Code, our Commission shall review and issue preservation notices of action for any future streetscape rehabilitation design plans and proposals for individual properties prior to the commencement of work. Section 5, that pursuant to Section 405-26L7F of the Form-Based Code, a copy of this resolution shall be forwarded to the Kingston Common Council, along with the petition and supporting documents for their final consideration and action. Section 6, based on the findings of this resolution, Section 40526 L7F of the Form-Based Codes, interim protections for pending landmarks are not applicable to the Pike Plan canopy. Section 7, this resolution shall take effect immediately. Do I hear a second?
Second, Nettie Morano.
Thank you, Nettie. Is there any further discussion that folks would like to have on the resolution as proposed? Kevin, were you able to hear all that?
Yes, I did. My only comment would be, if the SHPO were to weigh in or the Common Council were to weigh in, differently than the resolution, perhaps we should reconsider this. Yeah,
Well,
but only if somebody weighs in.
Would actually make this determination, you're just providing them with a recommendation.
I can't hear what you're saying.
you need to turn your mic on.
So the Common Council is the body that will be
Yeah,
making a
right.
determination. So right now, what you guys are providing is a recommendation.
Yeah, well, I would reconsider the recommendation if the
Yeah, no,
council
well,
feels
if the Common
different.
Council decides to approve it, it doesn't come back to you. They make that determination.
Okay,
Right.
then
And
what I'm
it
saying
would
is moot.
become, I'm sorry, I'm
Yeah,
speaking of.
I
Go
understand
ahead,
what you're
please,
saying.
Kevin.
Then what I'm saying is moot, and we can, end and I'll end the discussion.
Yeah, they have the final say. We just get to recommend. If they want to kick it back to us, that's one of their choices.
Well, that's what I was saying, but again, it could be moot if they don't kick it back. Then yeah,
Right. So for today, I'm putting this
Right.
forward as our recommendation.
understood.
Okay. Any other questions or comments from commission members? Hearing none, I'll call the roll. Nettie?
Aye.
Robert?
Aye.
Andrea? Kevin?
Aye.
I also vote in the affirmative. Thank you all. Does this require everyone's signature or just mine?
Nope, requires everybody here.
Okay.
You want to start signing, you sign here and there, please.
Okay.
And then we need to do the letter to ship up next.
Yeah.
And then that will be his decision.
Okay, so I sign there and there.
And you have the letter, right?
Yeah, I'm willing to sign that though, if you've got it.
We want to read through it and we need to do that, like have the committee make a motion as to.
Good night, thank you. All right.
He's gonna do that next. He's got to appoint the commission.
Okay. Has everyone had a chance to review? No, that's right. Review the cover letter. Now this is addressed to SHPO.
This is,
Do we have a separate transmission letter to the Common Council?
no, that'll just go, that's in your
Okay,
resolution.
so it's
that it will go,
recited.
So that will just go separately.
All right.
I do have one comment on the, I think it's the third paragraph from the end. Something that doesn't quite flow correctly. I don't think it's the second sentence on the third paragraph. At this time, the canopy was entirely removed, reconstructed with new fabric, design changes, et cetera, et cetera. I would say instead of with new fabric, I would put in materials. Fabric implies fabric.
Okay, could say fabrication.
I would just say new materials.
Yeah, it went from wood to concrete.
And actually, to that end, I would say reconstructed with modern materials instead of new materials. There's a, specific for this going to SHPO, that's more of their language that they speak.
like that change as well.
So if the rest of this is acceptable, then we'll have the commission authorize, unless you want to stop down. Good night.
Thank you. Thanks for coming out. Oh, yeah. All right, so I'm going to ask the commission if you support my issuing this descriptive letter to SHPO. Has everyone had a chance to read through it? This does not need to be a type 2 action under
No,
SEQR,
this is just
presuming.
a letter.
We are exempt. Yay. Every so often, we should have something be exempt. All right. I will entertain a motion authorizing me to send this letter to SHPO.
So moved, Robert.
Thank you, Robert. Do I hear a second?
Second, Nettie.
Thank you, Nettie. Any further discussion? Hearing none, I'll call the roll. Nettie?
Aye.
Robert?
Aye.
Andrea?
Aye.
Kevin?
Aye.
I also vote yes.
Okay.
So you can send that out over my signature.
Yep, but now I have, here, that has to get signed now.
All right. Are we going to double back to,
Yes.
let's see, the referral from the zoning task force? Is someone here on that? I don't
Yeah.
see it. Was someone going to make a presentation on that, or what's going on? Do we need to carry that over to next month?
No, I mean, we can, did you read the notes on it? Basically, what this is the city. Thank you. When the city adopted their form-based code, they also put into effect a task force, which I sit on as well. And it is really set up to address any issues that we see in terms of the application of the new form-based code. And, you know, obviously we anticipated that there might be some quirks here or there. Things don't work quite the way we had intended, so they need to be modified and adjusted. And, you know, through the function of waivers and waiver requests, we identified some of them. Obviously, the window signage that you saw tonight is going to probably be one of the matters that is addressed, because that's a common design scheme. And obviously, it not being allowed for storefronts, it kind of conflicts with our historic kind of sign patterns. So that's what is happening in that group. And one of the things that they wanted the commission's input on is the first floor heights. So under the new code, let me go back to it. You have in your notes, I believe, the table, which shows the areas that we're looking at are basically in the T5 and the T4 transects. So under the new code, in the T5 transects, you've got a required first floor heights, and that's floor to floor of 16 feet. In T5 Main Street and T5 Flex. In the T5 neighborhood, it goes down to 12. And then in T4 Main Street and T4 neighborhood, you have the same 16 foot. And in a T4 neighborhood, or T4 neighborhood open, it's 16, and T4 neighborhood is 12. So what we're seeing are, you know, that in looking at where these transects are, we understand the intent is to make more diverse neighborhoods that offer more multi-use, mixed-use neighborhoods, mixed-use buildings. And in the main streets, you might feel that that's applicable. But we are getting a lot of question and pullback on that, you know, energy, you know, costs obviously become a little bit more excessive when you have the higher ceiling heights required. In some of these districts where you have T5 in the T5 neighborhood and T4 neighborhoods, the first floors are residential. and a maximum, floor to floor of 12 feet is a little excessive when the building code requires 7. All right. So, um, you know, looking at, when it's in a Main Street situation, we were looking at to go with a more of a contextual meaning that you look at what is on adjacent properties. And this is mostly with infill, because obviously when you have an existing structure, it is what it is. Unless you're doing a total rehab and a total gut and you're going to restructure your floors, which doesn't happen, and Andrea can attest to that. This is more infill.
The only situation you're gonna have that is maybe a balloon frame building.
Right.
And even if it is, I don't know that you're gonna wanna change it.
Right.
Right.
So
Or-
really what they were, wanted the feedback from the Landmarks Commission on is that when we're talking about historic districts, okay, they don't want to maybe lower the height so much that it doesn't really meet with the historic district intent. And it's a lot of corner buildings, corner lots, for example, were identified, like in the Rondout, there's a vacant corner lot. And, they were just playing around with it and thinking if we lowered that to, a 12-foot, what would that look like in context with the other buildings along the street? And it might not fit in. Um, I'm a big proponent of contextual. I think that that's an appropriate way to judge. But you also, these transects exist in more than just and that's the hard thing. The transects exist outside of the historic districts as well. There's not one that's specific to all of your districts, and your districts are expanding too. We just adopted the Wilbur neighborhood, right, as a local historic district. So your districts are expanding. The districts all have their own different characteristics. If we ultimately go to Pankaki and do a historic district, majority of those properties are residential in nature. So, they're not, historic districts aren't just your downtown kind of business districts. They're residential neighborhoods in some cases. Fair Street, another great example where they're older homes. They're not, granted, there were a lot of office uses in that street segment. They were mostly in the basements though, and they were doctors who lived in those buildings, doctors, dentists, whatever, other professionals, and they had their offices in their basement areas. So they really want to ask for your feedback. They've come up with some proposed heights. I think the T4 is still being discussed right now because we recently, in front of the planning board, had an application in a T4N. It was a housing project. It was approved, and they're following the code with the 12-foot ceiling, but after the fact, they've realized, it's a 4-family row house style structure on a steep incline hill. And they're realizing that the 12-foot might be a bit much for them. They're going to go with it because that's what they approved, but after the fact, they made a comment that that's a little bit steep, that's high for first floor ceiling for residential. Their concern again goes back to economics, not only construction, but the heating costs. And, these are going to be, they're going to be rentals in most cases. And so the renters are going to end up paying bearing that burden. And that's not inducive to getting people really to rent some of these places. So I don't know how, the commission feels. You can, think about it for a month, or if you'd like. One suggestion might be to take a look at these, go around to a couple of the historic districts, look at what the ceiling heights are. In some cases, go to the Stockade, go to the Rondo, go to West Chestnut Street, and look at look at what's there, and then, maybe look at what the underlying transect zone is and, if there were infill, what would it be required to be? Is that suitable? Is that not suitable? Do you think what they're proposing is out of line? When they say what they're proposing under T5M, I just want to be clear that 16 feet is still a requirement, but there's a contextual option for interior lots. When they say interior lots, they mean just not a corner lot. So if you're in the middle of a block, it's an interior lot.
No, I am also going through this with our office.
Right.
So something maybe more appropriate for just general comment on the commission. So again, this is floor to floor height.
Floor
So
to floor.
if you're thinking about it then in terms of what a typical structure is going to have, a floor system itself is going to be roughly 12 inches a foot in depth. So your ceiling height then for a 12-foot is actually 11 feet. If you put in a drop ceiling, again, let's say example, you have a commercial structure, you're probably going to want that sort of empty plenum to actually have mechanical, electrical, plumbing, that kind of stuff in it. You're hiding that with either a drop ceiling of some kind, not always acoustic, could be drywall, could be any number of materials. For residential, typical ceiling height in a residence is 8 feet, just for context sake. Maybe you get up to 9 or maybe even 10 in some historic places for a residence. That's even pretty rare. Just giving you sort of my 2 cents on this. So another thing to consider with the 12-foot floor to floor height, the code does have something in it, and I'd have to look and cite the exact spot, but there is something in there, I believe, that if you have a 12-foot floor to floor, you need to have a landing in the middle of your stair. And in some cases that kind of takes up a lot of additional space in terms of planning for your floor plan if you're constructing new construction.
What's the cutoff?
I believe it's 12. Don't take my word for it because I don't have the code section in front of me, but I believe it's around 12 feet or higher needs to have a landing in the middle of the stair. Yeah. So again, don't take my word for it right now because I would like to look at that code section specifically, but that is definitely something to consider. For commercial.
Yes, for residential, would that be like 1, 2, and 3 family, or when you say
I believe that's residential, that's the residential code specifically.
Okay.
And I believe that also applies to commercial code as well. Like I said,
Okay.
that might be something we want to
Okay.
kind of have a back and forth with the building department on for practicality purposes. Like in a single family residence, I mean, obviously for some quirky homes, you'll need a landing, but in a lot of cases, we prefer to do the straight run stair. It saves on space. You don't have to have this extra double wide sort of scissor stair. So if you have to put a landing in the middle of that, that stretches out your stair even further than you would want it to be. So just maybe something as a consideration from my standpoint.
Early, but the larger buildings that form a lot of that district are, as this might fit them, but even Fair Street or certainly the Stockade. I mean, some of them.
Kinda tip sideways.
Right. The
You're short people then.
Revolutionary era buildings, you're kind of hunching over to go up the stairs. Very, this would make a building that just does not fit. I remember when we had the building on Green Street at the end of John Street, that little modern bungalow building, we were forcing them to jut out at approximately the same level
Yep.
as the stone buildings
Right.
next to them.
They
And
never
they
did
were
that.
clearly, yeah, they were able to design it, but I don't know if it would fit this. I think it was closer to 10, not 12. I
But-
think,
Yeah, with the, I mean, obviously I do work all over the city of Kingston and I find a lot of single-family residences very commonly have a 10-foot floor to floor, or some even less. Um, so, for the areas where you have single-family residential, this is really tall,
Yeah.
really tall.
I think this is begging for it to look wildly out of
Okay,
place.
so what I had Ethan put up on the screen is, this is the transect zone map. Okay, so you can see like in Uptown Kingston, that's a lot of your T5 MS, and your T5N is around the perimeter of that.
Yeah, Ethan, can you turn off everything except for the ones that are in this table?
If you go
Is that
in
po- I
the
believe that's
layers,
possible.
yeah. Right, pull it, drop down, so.
Ooh, I didn't. This was possible.
Okay, so,
So now you get a better understanding of where these areas are.
right, they're in the more dense, centralized areas of the city. Down in the Rondout, like along Lower Broadway, your T5N, your T5MS, and your T4Ns. So you've got all of these transects in the Rondout district. In the West Chestnut Street, it looks like you do not have, you might at the very end, you're gonna have T5, but then the majority of that looks like it may be in the T3. Outside of the T, because you have your districts on too. Can you turn the districts off just real quick? It's, yeah. So there you, so with we know kind of where the boundaries of the districts are. So, your West Chestnut Street only towards Broadway, really has a lot of this type zoning. So they would be outside of the T5 and the T4.
They tend to be the more modern, lower construction.
Right. Again, Fair Street, and all uptown, the Fair Street Historic District, you see is pretty much all in, with a little bit of an exception down towards Henry. But you do have a lot of the T4NO, T4N, T5N, T5MS is all uptown, along the main streets.
Mhm. Right. So the biggest impact looks like Rondout from our point of view.
Yeah, well, when you think, kind of think in your head where there's the most opportunity really for new construction to take place, and I think Rondout has the most potential right now, in terms of vacant lots. I think most of the other districts are pretty much built up, although, that's not to say that something could happen to some of the structures and we start new construction.
Right. Fires, who knows? All right. I would be more comfortable with a minimum of 10-foot with an ability for us to vary within historic districts to match nearby structures, something along those lines. Yeah.
Sorry, Kevin, contextual.
Yep, I like that word.
That's one of my favorite words.
Lawyers like it too.
We have something in common, Mark.
Stunning.
I think overall, and because these transects exist not only in the historic districts, but they exist outside of the historic districts. I think, in terms of your approach for infill, new construction within a historic, we're looking at it outside of this code even existing, you would look at it contextually. I think you would look at something and you would say, how does that really conform? You're not looking for it to be exactly, you don't want an exact replica, but you want something that complements and something that is compatible. And that's really looking at the contextual nature of what's in the immediate surrounding area. I mean, and I think that's the way you would approach it anyway.
So, there are so many empty lots down there, but so what if somebody wants to, would they not be able to do it in a modern structure that, like the form kind of fits, but the floor height and all that is all wonky compared to these things? Is it a case by case basis, contextual?
Yes, yeah, and well, the way the code reads now, there's no flexibility. Right now, it's 16, 16, whatever, 12, whatever you're in, that's it. So what's being proposed in a couple of the transects is to reduce it, like the T4 Main Street would be going from a 16 to a 14. The T5 Flex they're proposing 16 to 14. And in the T5 at Main Street, would be 16 feet staying, but it would be contextual, with a 12-foot minimum, on interior lots. I think in historic districts, you might want to have like a separate, almost separate category, and that you look at each one contextually, no matter where it is and in what transect it is. Because, again, new construction on a corner lot, there's a vacant corner lot on Lower Broadway. And, new construction going in there, I think, you're going to want to look at how that's designed. You're not going to want something with a 7, 8 foot ceiling, I don't think, on the ground floor, floor to floor. I think that will not be compatible with all of the buildings coming down, Broadway. And so that's where you would look at contextually, where does this stand? And corner buildings are, really cornerstones. They are really what sets the mood for the whole block in many cases. So when you're building there, you want to make sure that it's, a building that has some kind of real prominence. Yeah. And I think you would want in that instance, maybe a higher ceiling, to take place. And that's not to say that, you couldn't have, a 16-foot corner and then a 14-foot next to it. I think that would be okay. You do want variety. You don't want everything so linear, because that gets boring. That
Right.
takes
And Lower Broadway makes that almost impossible.
well, I mean, again, just look at both sides of Lower Broadway. Look at the side where you have the new construction and look at the side where you have the older buildings. What's more interesting? Yeah, and they're not all the same floor heights on the first floor, whereas the other side is more of an identical kind of construction, and that's right. So when you're looking at building in a historic district, you're not going to want that identical nature, but you want that variation. You want the ability to have that flexibility.
Yeah.
So,
So,
could it be a range? I mean, you give a range for everything, and then if it goes outside the range, then
You can do a range. I mean, again, they're asking for your input specifically as it relates to construction in historic districts, though. I mean, they're really looking, from your point of view, from the historical context. And there are buildings that sit outside of districts that are, historically, they're on registers, whether local, national, state, or national. There are a lot of buildings outside of historic districts that have eligibility. Look at Albany Avenue as an example, right? I mean,
Yeah.
there are multiple buildings along Albany Avenue. There's probably the ability to construct on a couple places along Albany Avenue. So again, contextually, I think there, I wouldn't, I would want to make it so that they are almost, not identical, but compatible,
But how do you put that in
Well,
the
there-
rubric of the code?
You could possibly think about maybe a separate line where buildings are in historic districts or are historic in nature or properties are in a historic district. That you look at the contextual first floor ceiling height.
Oh, and we would allow X number of feet variance to fit.
Yeah, I mean, obviously you can't go lower than the building code. So, like you said, you might duck in some buildings now, but you can't replicate that.
No, that
that
would not be
ceiling height,
permitted.
yeah.
If you're building a new house on Albany Avenue, say, so you, yeah, well, and, if you have an architect, they're gonna wanna know parameters, right? To work with. Do they come, if somebody was building on Albany Avenue, would they come to the planning board with the?
Well, it would depend on it. Really, what we see depends on what the intended use is going to be. If they're 1, 2, and 3 families, we don't look at them. That's solely a building department new construction. If it's in a historic district, it would be the building department, and obviously the Landmarks Preservation Commission would still review that proposal, though.
So I think for a historic district, we would ask that there be a provision for variance by us, perhaps, or a variance to within 2 feet or 4 feet of the surrounding contextual buildings. Something along those lines, I think. I mean, we have to go from the teeny tiny in the Stockade district and next to some of the stone structures
Right, but you
scattered
still,
around
I mean,
town.
obviously, building code is building code. You're not going to get lower than what building code would be allowing.
But
And
to look at the context, 8 foot, well, this would argue for if the minimum is 10 feet, we would probably be happier with 10 than 16, looking like it was 2 stories.
Right.
Made up in, next, would swallow the house next door. Stuff like that we would want to avoid. I'm not sure how to phrase it or insert it into the way the code works as smoothly as we can, but we've got different problems in different spots. On West Chestnut Street, we'd want to see higher,
Right.
probably, depending on.
agree. I mean, again, maybe you say, I'd have to give this some thought on how to word it, but if it is in a historic district, that this commission be given the ability to weigh in on a contextual first floor height or on a first floor height, looking at, and you still have to have parameters. I think you can't.
I think the way I'm thinking of it would be 4 feet more or less, or 6 feet more or less. I don't know enough about the building code to know what our absolute limits are. Presumably, you would take a look at what's listed here and say, contextual within what is permitted by building code and up to the maximum. Yeah. Or they'd have to go for something more, a variance beyond that would that be available through the ZBA or the planning board?
That's either a minor or a major waiver.
Yeah.
It's a dimensional, so it's a waiver.
So we would be, instead of a waiver, we could recommend, or we could allow a waiver of within a historic district. It seems clumsy. I don't know how to,
Yeah,
I don't know how to make
it's
it simple.
difficult because there is no,
I tend to agree.
yeah, right, yeah, that it's,
Put an-
you not try and lump it with everything else.
Put an
right?
asterisk next to it and say for, specific requirements within historic designations, see historic preservation code sections.
Then you would have to have some kind of parameter.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Ah, tape. Is that useful?
Yep.
Okay.
I did find the code section for residential with regards to stair heights. It's 151 inches no higher than 151 inches until you need a landing essentially.
Okay.
So it is taller than 12 feet. I thought it was less. So that's why I said you can't rely on my recollection. I look at
All
these
right.
things all day long and I can't commit them to memory. Each
Aw,
each
gee.
code book is this big, so just saying.
Ever read tax code?
Yeah.
Don't.
I do not want to.
Do not.
All right, so we still,
So-
hang
so
on.
We
We're
have
not
one more
done.
letter that needs approval to our fun friends who might give us money. Hi, the Summerhill Foundation in beautiful Madison, Connecticut.
Right, so this letter is, in short, a continuation of a conversation the commission had earlier this year, which was potentially revisiting the 1980s proposed Stockade Expansion District, and conversations between planning staff and the Grants Management Office had identified this foundation, which does offer grants to municipal governments related to historic preservation. And we felt that it was worthwhile for the commission to send a letter of inquiry on this matter.
So this is a very polite solicitation.
Give me your-
Yes, in keeping with historic preservation. And drinking tea with your pinky extended. Has everyone had a chance to take a look at this letter? Any comments regarding it? Kevin, did you get a chance to look this over?
No, I don't think I did.
No, we didn't did we circulate that? Oh, okay.
Yeah, today or yesterday.
Gosh, Kevin.
What? A piece of paper escaped you?
Yeah.
We can't allow that.
Yes,
Um,
things happen.
strange but true, it has happened. And essentially, we are asking for a grant to revisit the 1980s stockade
Yeah,
expansion.
that I caught. Yeah.
And essentially, we're talking about how we're really, really wonderful and historic, and you should want to support us.
Yeah, it sounds all good. Sounds
All
all,
right.
Yep.
Any further discussion?
Nope.
All right. I will move that I be allowed to sign this letter of inquiry to the Summerhill Foundation. Do I have a second?
Second, Robert.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Hearing none, I'll call the roll. Nettie?
Hi.
Robert?
Aye.
Andrea?
Aye.
Kevin?
Aye.
I make it unanimous. I will sign on the line.
Okay.
All right. I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Sign that other one first.
Sign this one? Yep. But I will, while doing this, entertain a motion to adjourn.
No.
Aha! Do I hear a second?
Second, Andrea.
All right. I will call the roll. Nettie,
Aye.
Robert,
Aye.
Andrea,
Aye.
Kevin.
Aye.
Ah, yes.
There.
We stand adjourned. I
Okay.
vote yes. Got it, got it.
Yeah, that's all right.
Well, with
And I will